Hi guys, welcome back to the final episode, or at least final for the moment, of the Path to a New Edition. During this series I've been going through the D&D Next Playtext packages from 2012-2013, which were variant rules for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. As they were progressing from 4th edition to 5th edition, they were trying out different playtest packages, and then they were polling the playtesters to see what was successful and what was not. Now, when I went into this series, what I thought I was going to be doing was looking at the direction they were taking Dungeons & Dragons in then, and using this final episode to look at what of those rules they might be bringing into 6th edition. Well, what's become clear as I've done all of the 9 playtest packages is that they were trying to take it back to basics, but they ended up not going in that direction. The early playtest packages were stripping Dungeons & Dragons right back to the very basic sets, the very 1970s, early 80s versions, as they thought that's what players wanted. But it turned out the player base had evolved and wanted a lot more. So the 5th edition we got was somewhat stripped back from 4th and even 3rd edition, but a long way away from what 1st edition and 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons were like, or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So, this final video, instead of being what can we learn from those playtest packages, instead looks onto what they're doing now. What have Wizards of the Coast announced about 6th edition, which is coming out in 2 years' time to mark the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons. But they've been releasing playtest packages all along. The Unearthed Arcana section on their website releases revised classes, revised rules, revised spells, and then polls people. So let's have a look at a few of those on the desktop, and let's have a look at recent rules releases so we can try and see where 6th edition Dungeons & Dragons is going and what predictions we can make for that version that comes out in 2 years' time. Now, perhaps what I should make clear first of all is that I don't think the next edition is going to be called 6th edition Dungeons & Dragons. You see, when they announced they're going to release a new version for the 50th anniversary, what they've also said is that it's going to be 100% compatible with 5th edition. So there can't be many major rule changes. It's going to be mainly 5th edition, just with some tweaks. And I've got my own ideas about where those tweaks are going to be, which we'll speak about in a moment. But I don't think it's going to be a major revision, so it's not going to be 6th edition Dungeons & Dragons, although they might call it that. They might call it 5.5, which is more what this is looking like. It's looking more like the minor changes between 3rd edition and 3.5 edition, rather than the massive changes between 3rd edition and 4th edition. But they've been talking about that. Now, on their Sage Advice, they've got their errata PDFs, which we'll come on to in a second. But they've also got, through the website, the Unearthed Arcana pages. Now, I've only opened up one here, the Paladin. And what you can see here is it's offering 2 new oaths. Because Paladins at 3rd level take their oath. Now, they can be an oath to a god, they can be an oath of vengeance, etc. And this adds 2 new ones, Oath of Conquest and Oath of Treachery. And I think over the next couple of years, what we're going to get is them revisiting the oaths and the other features to tweak them slightly for 6th edition. Because the way it's looking is most of the changes are going to be made within character generation and leveling. Whereas the rules themselves, and I don't think the spells are going to be much changed. There'll be minor tweaks, of course, but mainly it's going to be compatible, so there can't be any major changes. So, for the Paladin, they're offering 2 new oaths here. For the Barbarians, they're offering new paths, I think they're called, and so on and so forth through the Rangers, monks, priests, wizards, everything. They're offering new options to each. Now, the one that majorly revised was actually the Ranger, which they thought was underpowered. So that gives me the idea that they're probably going to revisit the problematic ones. So the Barbarian bear tradition and the monk shapeshifter bear. In fact, with the monk file, they have actually updated it to allow very particular shapeshifting at set levels. and how you learn those. So there's only a certain chance of you being able to be familiar enough with a bear to be able to shapeshift in one. Now that limits things out a bit, and I think restricts it and improves the druid ability to shapeshift. Now, other things they've done is they've released the erratas. Now this has been the major newsworthy ones. The DMG errata are minor changes throughout. There's not a lot in there. But the Player's Handbook errata is a massive change which has rung alarm bells. People do not like the changes here. Because if we look through, we can see races. New racial traits, page 17, the alignment section has been removed. New dwarf traits, page 20, the alignment section has been removed. New elf traits, page 23, the alignment section has been removed. Now, I think that's a clue that alignment is basically gone in the next edition. It might exist as a placeholder because it's always supposed to have been there for Dungeons & Dragons. But I think alignment's a thing of the past. Basically in 5th edition they've weakened it out so much anyway, because where once you could only be a paladin if you were lawful good, they've opened it up to other alignments. To be a druid you had to be neutral, true neutral or plain neutral, I can't remember quite which. I think it's true neutral you had to be. But that's been done away with. And things like protection from good and protection from evil only work against certain species. So protection from evil only works against demons and devils and certain other spiritual creatures. Whereas it used to work against evil-aligned characters and give you an advantage against them. That's all been wiped out of the game. So alignments which have been so weakened, I think are pretty much a thing of the past. Unless they just leave them in as a placeholder, an optional rule, I think they may be left in as. The other big thing is they've brought in about Dark Elves, Drow, to not make them evil all the time. Instead of being followers of Lolth, it mentions that the cult of the god Lolth, Queen of Spiders, has corrupted some of the oldest Drow cities, especially in the worlds of Oerth and Toril. Eberron, Krynn, and other realms have escaped the cult's influence for now. Well, this kind of fits into the way the Player's Handbook was anyway, but mainly the Player's Handbook was set up for the Forgotten Realms, because we've had different worlds set up for different editions of Dungeons & Dragons in the past. I'm trying to think, was it 3rd edition was Greyhawk, 4th edition was Eberron, and 5th edition's been the Forgotten Realms. Well, the next edition's going to be pretty much straight on from 5th, so it's probably still going to be the Forgotten Realms, which is probably the most popular of the settings anyway. So I don't expect many changes there. But it's paying lip service to the other worlds, which it kind of does throughout the book anyway, so I don't see any major problems with that change. But I think the biggest change is the way they're going to treat race. Now, I really want to visit on this one because there's been a lot of scandals lately that people have been saying that orcs and dark elves are racially insensitive to black people. I don't know whether this is going to end up getting me censored on YouTube, but to the hell with it. Now, personally, I don't see that, but I can understand if people were offended by it. It would be easy to pigeonhole those in from the way that historically black people have been treated and the way those races are treated. So I can see that. Now, they're wanting to strip that away by not making those species evil all the time. So they've stripped away the alignment things from half-orcs and dark elves especially, and stop them following evil gods, make them more open to playing good characters. But also the problem with half-orcs was they were low intelligence, which was also seen as racially insensitive. So what they introduced in this sourcebook, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, if we flick on a few pages, lovely artwork, very nice book as usual, we get to everything's optional. Character options on page 7 here. Customizing your origin. Ability score increases. Whatever D&D race you chose for your character, you get a trait called Ability Score Increase. This increase reflects an archetypal bit of excellence in the adventures of this kind in D&D's past. For example, if you're a dwarf, your constitution increases by 2, because dwarf heroes in D&D are often exceptionally tough. This increase doesn't apply to every dwarf, just to dwarf adventurers, and exists to reinforce an archetype. That reinforcement is appropriate if you want to lean into the archetype, but it's unhelpful if your character doesn't conform to the archetype. If you would like your character to follow his own path, you may ignore your ability score increase and assign ability scores tailored to your character. Take any ability score increase you gain in your race or sub-race and apply it to an ability score of your choice. So if you've got the dwarf one, which is +2 to constitution, and you want to play a dwarf wizard, you add it to your intelligence, get a +2 to intelligence. And that's very flexible. It's a very simple rule, and that's what I think they're definitely going to lean into in the next edition. Whereas in the playtest packages we saw lots of options, and 4th and 3rd editions especially were filled with player options. One of the reasons why 5th edition's been so successful is it strips those back to make it easy. This is the training wheels version of Dungeons & Dragons, and that rule in there keeps that. So you get a +2 ability modifier, which is usually applied to constitution in the place of dwarves. Now, I think that might lead to some interesting balancing problems, because your dwarf now gets +2 to constitution, and if you're playing a mountain dwarf, you're getting +2 to strength. So you've got 2 +2s you can add to attributes to boost your character up. Now, obviously, the rules will say that they have to go to different attributes. You can't get a +4 to your intelligence. But you can move them around. And it makes demi-humans, or meta-humans, or however you refer to them, as flexible as humans, taking away a bit from the humans +1 to everything across the board. Now, I like that rule, but as I said, I think it's going to need some balancing, because where you're getting large increases, like +2s there, it might lead to unbalanced characters, because why would you play a human getting +1 across the board if, as a dwarf, you get +2 to add to your 2 important stats, whichever ones you see as those, and you get to see in the dark, and the other advantages of being a dwarf. And the races across the way like that. So half-orcs get big bonuses, etc., etc. Your dark elf gets +2 to dexterity and +1 to charisma, if I remember rightly. Some nice bonuses, coupled with dark vision, which is extremely long ranged, and other abilities, some spells, etc. Now, the things that carried on through is you can customize your languages. So if you're playing a dark elf who was raised in one of the surface realms, then they might not know Undercommon and those languages, and you can swap those out for the languages of the area your character came from, which is probably something your GM would probably let you do anyway. Also, proficiencies. So if you get free proficiencies or skills, you can swap them out, and there's a table here. You know, swap skill for skill, swap armor proficiency for a simple martial weapon or tool, simple weapon for a simple weapon or tool, martial weapon for a simple martial weapon or tool, tool for tool or simple weapon. And you can do that. It also goes through changing skills, changing around your subclass, etc., etc. So that's where I think the big changes for the next version of Dungeons & Dragons is going to be. That they're going to swap out set things which have been seen to be problematic, alignments and bonuses to various stats which play into the stereotypes of those races, and make it all optional, allowing you to create very, very smart half-orcs if you want to, which completely defeats the stereotype. I also wonder if they might make the simplest problem go away by just changing race to species. Because obviously the races being better or worse than other, and races being good or evil, all is because of that word race. Whereas if they are all just species, like they are treated in other games, that just kind of goes away. you can't complain about one species really being better than another. But I think that might be problematic to the player base, because choosing your race class is so built into Dungeons and Dragons. But it would be a simple change, and it wouldn't make any difference to play, and it would just make racism disappear out of the game a bit. Otherwise, I don't think there's going to be any massive changes for 6th edition. I think it's going to be a tidying up of the rules. They're going to playtest a few things, but all the changes are going to be based around what I've just discussed about race, modifying the classes and improving those, and that side of things. You're not going to see big changes in monsters' abilities. You're not going to see big changes in spells or anything like that. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough. And this is the last episode in this series, or at least for the moment. If there's more news about, if they do bring out playtest materials for 6th edition, or release news about that, I will do follow-up videos on this series. But otherwise, that's me done with the path to a new edition. So thank you very, very much for watching. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.